Hello friends, welcome back to my channel Learn Smart Coding. This is Karthik. Thanks for joining with me today. So in this video what I'm going to cover is how to add the authentication and authorization part in your Angular application. The concept that I'm going to use is very popular one and very secured one, which is Azure Active Directory Business to Consumer. In short form we will call it as Azure AD B2C. So we will go through the Azure AD B2C concepts, and we will also see how to do the app registration and configure these things in your web API and the Angular application. This video clip is part 4, and we are going to see the app registration. So on my screen I have opened up the place where I have left, meaning Azure AD B2C for the directory that I have created, and you see this left side under the manage there is something called app registration. Okay, so click on the new app registration, and it will take you a page where you have to enter a couple of things. Okay, so the first thing that we will do is we're talking about two application, right? Our web Angular shopping application and the supported web API. So we are going to do for the web API first. So essential product web API is the name, and there are three options, right? The first two options does not apply for what we are doing. We are talking about consumers, so choose the third one. Okay, so that's the identity provider that supports here, and you see this is the application if you run it from the local. So I'm going to take that URL which runs from the local and provide that as a return URL or the redirect URL, which is mandatory. So choose the web as the framework and then provide the return URL. Okay, so we have done with the return URL. Now this application is ready. Now what we have to do is go to this expose an API and click on add a scope. And you see this under the right side, there is a name and then followed by a GUID. That's the default GUID that gets created or generated. We don't need to have such name because it's not easy to remember. So let's have some meaningful name. So I'm going to provide essential products / API. So if you see this complete URL, it will become a unique, and we know this the scope that we are going to add it for this application, and by the name itself we can find it. So once you do that, this is the place where you need to add the scopes. Scopes are basically kind of the privilege that we give for the users, and then also in the web API methods. Okay, so that will determine which method requires what scope, and if the user is having that scope in their JWT token, then they will be allowed to access. That is what the scope will do. Okay, so we will create categories.read. Basically the scope is to tell that okay, if you have the scope you will be allowed to read the APIs, okay, all the get endpoints. That is what the first scope is. Let's create another scope called categories.write. So these two scopes will go for the category controller in our web API, which you already know the APIs are present in GitHub. Okay, so here for the the DML operation put post delete, we will put the categories.write, and then for the other get methods we will say categories.read. So two scopes we have added. We have another controller called products, right? So let's quickly create products.read and products.write. Just name the scope properly and provide some display name and the description. That's for our understanding. Okay, and you may or may not be required to create the scopes for each controller. If couple of controllers together makes for one feature, of course you can use the same scope. It is not mandatory, but this is for the demo purpose. I'm going to create 4 scopes and put these two into 2 different controllers and show you how this matters for the API. Okay, so we're done with the 4 scopes created properly. All good. Now what we have to do is we can go back and create another application, and this time this application is for our Angular. And Angular is a SPA application. SPA means single page application. Okay, so I'm going to give a meaningful name called essential product SPA. Everything is same here. You choose single page application SPA. Okay, so now if you run the application locally, the local host is nothing but runs on the port 4200. So that's why I've provided this 4200, and don't forget to check this grant admin consent on the OpenID. Okay, so once you choose that, application is created, all good. So let's go to this API permission. See, now what we are telling is, we are telling okay, go to this API permission, click on add a permission and go to my API. So let me first tell you what we are doing. So choose the web API, the one that we created, and then we are choosing all the 4 things. So basically we are providing access to the API scopes that was exposed. Okay, so our Angular application now will have access to these 4 scopes under that web API. So now click on the grant admin consent. This is the full access that we are giving to our SPI application. Once this is done, okay, so those two applications are now ready to be configured, and then what we are going to see in the next video is go to the user flows and execute these user flows and see how this beautiful screen is going to show us. Okay, stay tuned. Thank you. Thanks for watching. If you like my video, don't forget to subscribe my channel, like it, share it, comment it, and never forget to click on the bell icon.